At this time, I would like to ask my good friend, and if y'all would, please stand. We're going to do a short prayer, and we'll be followed by a pledge to the American flag and the Texas flag. I'd like to call on my good friend and our County Sheriff, Tommy Gage, to lead us in prayer. Sheriff?
Thank you, Mayor. If you'll bow your heads, please. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this beautiful day, the blessings of this day. We ask tonight that you be with Congressman Brady as he conducts this town hall meeting, that the things that are said and done here tonight would be pleasing to you. We ask that you continue to be with our men and women who serve us so that we enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy today. Be with everyone as they leave this place. Forgive us of our sins. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Sheriff, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce and call to the stage for the posting of the colors and leading in our pledge, Boy Scout Troop 889 from Christ United Methodist Church.
Color guard attention. Color guard forward march. Please place your right hand over your heart. Color guard halt. Color guard across the colors. Color guard post the flag of the United States of America. Color guard post the flag of the great state of Texas. Color guard honor the flag of the Women's Troop 889. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in the Texas pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state of God, one indivisible. 2. Color guard, return to formation. Color guard about base. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Thank you for joining us tonight. Color guard dismissed.
Well done, Boy Scout Troop 889 from Christ United Methodist Church. Sheriff Gage, thank you for a wonderful prayer. Our country is in need of spiritual leadership, and Sheriff, you gave us a good start for this evening. Next up is our good friend, Congressman Kevin Brady. Kevin is 7-term congressman, served on the House Ways and Means Committee, the Joint Economic Committee. He and his wife, Kathy, and his family, his 2 sons, Will and Sean, live in the Woodlands. Continues to do an outstanding job for the people that he represents. We're very blessed to have a man of his character and his integrity. Several years ago, there was a political issue, and Kevin, I really, you made some bonus points with me, and I'll never forget it. He looked me in the eye and said, well, that's a tough decision. Don't know if I can get that done. He did all he could do, and he was upfront about it. The job that this man has to do is not an easy job. We can support him with our prayers, continue to offer our faith and assistance in him. Our country is in need of leadership like Kevin Brady. And with that said, Congressman, welcome to the Crichton Theater in downtown Conroe, Texas. You just keep up the good work.
Mayor, thanks very much for having us here. I love being in Crichton. You know, this is just a beautiful theater, beautiful venue. I mean, it is illustrative of how much work is done to restore downtown Conroe and the community is growing. So thank you for your leadership very much. Appreciate the sheriff. You know, any meeting, I don't know about you, any meeting you start with a prayer and the Boy Scouts posting the colors is a pretty good meeting, don't you think? Fantastic. So, Sheriff, thanks for being here. Thanks for your leadership, though, throughout the year, keeping us safe. And your folks have been so good about reaching out and educating us on some of the law enforcement challenges we've got in the county. So, Sheriff, thanks for your leadership. And Chief Dupuy of Conroe's here helping us out as well. We appreciate that as much. And the Boy Scout leader, Boy Scout Troop 889, the Scout leader is Eric Meanies. Where is Eric here? Look. Let's give I love Scout leaders. They give us so much time. And again, Jim Beam, thank you for letting us use the Crichton. I love being here. And they got great programs, great theaters. I need to get up here more often myself, as a matter of fact. So I love hearing the commercials about what's coming up. Thanks for being here. I know your lives are busy. We were doing a lot of town halls again this August. Both talked about sort of the three main issues people keep raising to me, but also find out what else we need to be working on, what your thoughts are about where we're going as a country, and how I can do, what more I can do to help represent you in Washington. You cannot listen enough in this job, and I think one of the biggest problems with Congress or Washington today, people aren't listening enough. You know, there's sort of this arrogant, we know best, you know, for the country, and it is one of the reasons so many people believe we are going in the wrong direction. So we do just the opposite. Town hall meetings like this are just invaluable to help you represent you. The three I want to talk real quickly about three issues: jobs, and especially this drilling moratorium. What's happening in Washington to damage our jobs here in Southeast Texas? Spending, the dangerous debts and deficits that we as a country are piling up, and finally the new health care bill and how it's going to affect you. We just revealed last week for the American public for the first time how the new health care law actually works, and it is unbelievable, or how it won't work is unbelievable. So let's talk about that. Jobs, you know, I've got a new hat the last 2 years as top Republican in the House on the Joint Economic Committee, so we spend every day literally pouring over economic data to see what's working, what's not, where we're headed. What's become clear to me is no country bounces back from recessions faster than we do. Americans are genetically predisposed to get out of recessions. We hate being in them, and so we bounce back so much faster. In fact, the rule of thumb is the deeper the recession, the faster we bounce back. But not this time. This recovery is very slow. It's very subpar. It is almost a third of the recovery in 81 and 82, the next most severe recession. It's a third of what that recovery is, and I think there's a reason for it. What is happening in Washington, like the stimulus bill, $862 billion, more than a trillion if you count the interest because we had to borrow all that money, is not worth it. You know, the stimulus bill, and we opposed it, I opposed it, a number of us did, because it wasn't really designed to create small business jobs along Main Street. It really was more of a political stimulus. I mean, there was more money put in there to buy public art in America than to help small businesses hire more workers. Too much of it was wasted. And my frustration is, if you look at what the White House promised the country, not me, they promised you. If Congress would just pass all that spending, three things would happen. One, the unemployment rate would never go above 8%. Well, it's 9.5% today. And the only reason it's that low is that last month 650,000 Americans just gave up looking for work. And so that lowered it to 9.5%. The second promise was there'd be, by the end of this year, 137 million Americans working in the private sector. They're about 7 million jobs short of that goal, and they're not going to come anywhere close. And the third promise was that all that stimulus money would create jobs. 90% of those jobs would be in the private sector and 10% in government. Turns out to be just the opposite. The private sector, Main Street America, has lost 3.3 million jobs. The only sector, the only part of the economy that's grown is the federal government. Added 400 and some thousand new jobs. That's probably fine if you work for the federal government in one of those jobs, but we all know those jobs only last as long as you, as taxpayers, will pay for those jobs. A recovery, a real recovery, a sustained recovery, comes from Main Street. It comes from private businesses rehiring old workers, hiring new ones, making that new investment. That's not happening this time. And I think there's reasons for it. Consumers are not going back to the stores. They're saving about 3 times more, we are, as consumers, than we did before the financial recession hit, John. And consumers are not letting go of their money, and there's a reason for it. I'm convinced they are so frightened. They look at the amount of debt and deficit this country is piling up each year. They know that's dangerous, and they also know someone's going to have to pay that back. And so they are smartly holding back on their savings. They're creating savings, holding back on their dollars, reluctant to step back into the marketplace. Businesses are doing the same thing. Businesses normally lead us out of that recession as well. That's not happening. Companies right now in America hold, this is a big number, it's almost 3 times more than the stimulus. $2 trillion of cash is what businesses in America are holding right now. They're not normally. They would be rehiring that worker, hiring a new one, buying a new piece of equipment, making that expansion decision, but they're not. They're holding back. And what they tell me is they're doing it because they are frightened by what's happening in Washington. They see new health care costs from the new bill, new higher energy prices because of cap and trade. They see new taxes being threatened on every size of business, small and large. They see new piles of regulation. And as they've told me, it's hard enough for us to predict the market. Trying to predict the market in Congress is impossible. We're holding pat. And because they're holding pat and reluctant to make that investment, we are in a very, very, very sluggish economy. In fact, if you look at the past year, the high point of this recovery was last Christmas. In the first quarter of this year, we fell from 5% to 3% plus change. This last quarter, we now fell to 2.4%. The next quarter, hard to know, but that is a very, very sluggish recovery. And if it continues that sluggishly, it'll take most of the rest of this decade to get back to where we were 2 years ago. So this recovery is not what we, I think, as a country deserve. And I think until we get Washington out of the way of the recovery, we're going to still see this sluggish. In my opinion. We talked about spending because this is such an overall issue. And for families in our 8th district, our 11 counties, this is the thing that people talk to me the most about that they're so frightened about. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go back to something while we're on jobs. An example of policies in Washington that kill jobs and hold back the recovery is this drilling moratorium that has been put in place 3 months ago. Every day that's in place, we are losing jobs, we are losing rigs, and with those rigs go U.S. workers, U.S. equipment, U.S. capital, and eventually the U.S. energy infrastructure. The moratorium has no basis in science. In fact, the scientists, some from Texas, who peer-reviewed the drilling moratorium for the Interior Department said, after the initial inspections of the rigs in the deep water, keeping the moratorium doesn't make the Gulf any safer. It just kills U.S. energy workers' jobs, and that's what's happening today. We are seeing small businesses struggle. We had layoffs already announced. small businesses like Blackhawk Special Tool. There's a company that's 3 years old, family owned, they have 50 employees, and they've been adding workers. Because of the moratorium, they lay off 20% of the workforce the first month, half of their workforce the second month. And as the owner told me, and he posed this question, you know, what business can possibly survive without 6 months of their revenue? Well, not many, maybe the big guys, but certainly not the small, mid-sized ones. So we're seeing a real struggle for a lot of our energy industry. And I've asked, the federal court struck down the moratorium once. The White House came back and imposed a second one. Then they said they would lift the shallow water ban, but they did. And what they did instead was they're just not issuing any permits. This is the permits that our government has approved since June a year ago. And since they supposedly lifted the moratorium in shallow waters, you can see what they're doing. 4 permits. So we've got companies here in Montgomery County, small, independent, Texas-owned companies who started before this moratorium with 4 or 5 rigs in the Gulf. They're now down to 1. If they don't get another permit, you know, they have 350 people on contract. They won't be keeping on contract. They have 150 people in their home office. They won't have cash for. So that every day this moratorium continues, the more damage occurs. So today, when I heard that Michael Bromwich, the new head of the Ocean Energy Management Agency, said that they were considering lifting the moratorium earlier, after they do a series of field hearings through August and mid-September, they might look at lifting the moratorium. My first thought was, one, you know, I'm pleased that they finally understand what damage is being done because of their moratorium. But lifting it late, or lifting it in name only, but still stopping the permits to drill, the damage from the moratorium still continues. So it actually needs to end now, get those rigs back to work, get that technology innovation back applied in the Gulf, because they are taking an environmental catastrophe in the Gulf, which the BP spill was. And now they're turning it into an economic disaster. And it's our energy workers and companies who are paying the price. It needs to be lifted now. I invited President Obama to come to Houston to meet with our energy workers. He's been in every other state, looking at every other part of the spill. I invited him down and said, look, meet with our energy workers and our small businesses. Don't have any of us in the room, no press, just go in there, face up to these people whose jobs are at risk, livelihood at risk, and listen to what's happening to them today. It's been 3 weeks and we haven't gotten a response yet. The President's supposed to announce he was coming to Houston August 9th for a fundraiser, which is fine. We said, that's great. Just give us an hour with our energy workers. If you can't give us an hour, give us 15 minutes. Can you spare any time at all to meet with our energy workers? So far, no response, except I learned as we walked in the door, they decided not to come to Houston. He's going to Dallas instead. So it just seems to me, if you really are concerned about the impacts of the Gulf, you got to come down and see real life Americans who didn't do anything wrong and are just struggling to survive. By the way, later this month, we're going to have a rally for energy workers here in Houston, where we're going to invite families and companies and people whose lives are tied to that Gulf to a rally in Houston. It's the end of the month. We'll get information out about it. We want to send a strong signal to Congress and the White House that these are real people whose lives are being changed. And I'd invite you to come be part of that rally when we have it. I think it's important to send a strong signal. And also we've got some those field hearings that Director Bromwich are holding. We're going to encourage people to send in written comments in that moratorium now. Don't wait till later. Don't do it in name only. We'd love to have your help to do that. From jobs to spending, main concern, we've got last year almost $1.5 trillion of debt added from last year's budget. This year, a record level higher than that. Next year, it will be very similar. This is the projection of how much debt every year that we as a country will go. If we don't change our ways, this is where we are headed. And that is actually a rosy scenario right there. Experts believe we're going to add $1 trillion each and every year for the next decade to America's debt. Yeah, I don't think the federal budget itself was $1 trillion total when I first went to Congress, and that wasn't all that long ago. But look what it does. On our economy, the way they sort of weigh how good a financial shape a country is in is that they look at the debt they owe versus the size of their economy. So they call it a debt to GDP. How much you owe versus everything you make. Right now, America owes 63% of everything we make as an economy. That's in the yellow zone already. In fact, if you took a look, we're running a deficit almost 10% this year. It's the third highest in the world. If you took a look at those 5 really shaky European countries that everyone is wondering if they'll make it through their own debt crisis, if you put the United States in comparison, we're in the middle of the pack already. If you allow the spending to continue, you can see that by 2010, our debt will be 100% of our economy. It will be as big as everything we make and produce as a nation. Every economist tells us that when a debt gets to 90%, you've got real problems. It becomes a drag on your economy. And the real life difference, because your government is so big, your interest payments get so big, it's just like in your own home. If you were the government, for every dollar you bring home, you were spending $1.42, $1.43. Imagine doing that every day, every week, every month, every year, and borrowing that, putting it on a credit card, borrowing it from the bank. I mean, look how quickly, and imagine all that debt was now equal to everything you'd owned, every asset, every income, every dollar you brought in. Your interest payments were the same as if adding a second mortgage to your budget. It weighs down everything you do and drags you down as a family. Well, that's what it does for our country as well. And when it gets to that level, that 100% level, here's the difference. It's the difference between the United States in the past that has had a relatively small government compared to a lot of these countries. And we've had steady 3.5% growth every year, popping along, highs and lows, but for the most part, we pump along at a pretty good pace. Europe and other countries with these high debts, high taxes, big government, they have this very sluggish 2.5% growth every year. The economists tell us we move from our U.S. go American economy to that sluggish European economy if we allow that debt to continue. So this isn't just about complaining about the size of the deficit for 1 year. It is about stopping a government in an interest and a debt burden that gets so big it drags down our economy, and our kids have to support a government so much bigger than we've ever had to do in America. The debt is as serious as it comes, and you cannot, and if you don't listen to anything else I say today, please listen to this. You cannot tax your way back to a balanced budget. The only way you can do it is to stop spending. It is the only way to balance the budget. We literally we could double everyone's taxes in America. Everyone in this room, everyone's taxes in America. This year we'd still run a deficit. Next year the same. Right now, our fear is that between now and the end of the year, Congress will not act to extend the Bush tax cuts for families, the Republican tax cuts for small businesses and capital gains and dividends, that they'll allow the death tax to come back full to life, that they'll allow the marriage penalty to come back full to life. That's another $600 a year for married couples. That they'll let the child tax credit to be cut in half. That's another $1,000 for a family with 2 children. And they'll let the alternative minimum tax, they won't fix it and keep it from growing. If it expands, it'll hit 24 million Americans who will have a second tax. As if the IRS didn't catch them the first time, AMT is the tax that catches them the second time to make sure they pay something. The combination of all that, almost $4 trillion, which will occur on January 1st. What that means for Texas families is that you and I will pay about $3,000 more a year to Uncle Sam than we do today. And I know I always say $3,000 probably doesn't sound like a lot in Washington, in Texas, in Conroe, Montgomery County. That's a lot of money for families. We can't allow those taxes to expire. We're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure they get extended. And again, the principle of this is Washington ought to tighten its belt before it ever asks you to tighten yours, you know, and it is, you didn't do the spending. Government did. They need to cut the spending, get it back to a balanced budget, and then we got to start paying down this debt. And it was interesting. Right now they're talking about, well, let's just tax the wealthy some more. Let's just tax professional small businesses who make up the two upper tax brackets. We'll just tax them more. That'll help us. On Monday, we all opened up the Conroe Courier, and here's the title: As wealthy spending weakens, so does the economy. Duh. You know, obviously, professional small businesses who are able to generate more revenue do spend more. But if they're the target of being taxed, if they're now the evil ones in America, if they know, they're going to carry even a bigger burden than they do today, what are they doing? They're holding on to their dollars. That's what this government doesn't understand. The more you tax people, doesn't mean it brings in more revenue. People are smart. They stop doing what they're punished for. They'll stop doing what they're taxed in ever increasing rates to do as well. So we've got to stop the spending. Final point, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. Speaking of spending, let me introduce you to your new healthcare system. You may remember last year in this theater, we had a chart as well. At that time, we charted the 1,000 pages of the Pelosi healthcare bill, kind of revealed it to the country. We were stunned that they had proposed 31 new federal agencies and bureaucracies as part of this system. I had my Joint Economic Committee staff for the past 4 months go through all 2,801 pages of the new law and chart it. And I said, let's show this new healthcare law to America, and at the same time, we may be able to show it to some of those lawmakers who didn't actually read the bill before they voted on it. And so they meticulously went through this bill, and here is the result. Everything, this is interesting, everything in color on that chart is newly added by the healthcare law. Except for the Health and Human Services Secretary, that agency, that person is our new health czar. She's expanded her power in such a way it's almost not recognizable. 600 new authorities flow through the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who will have a say in everything from our treatments to our doctors to our hospitals to everything, including rationing care. Everything, the blue, everything in dark blue in those lines there. This works. Nope.
There should be red buttons. The laser pointer should be down
This
there.
is why we have to increase education in America. Right? Man, it's slow. People slow need representation. Okay, everything in dark blue here on the chart is government that's been expanded. Everything dark blue is government that's now more intrusive into our healthcare lives. The orange right here, all these circles there, those are new agencies who have the power ultimately to ration healthcare, either by restricting the treatments we get as patients or automatically cutting Medicare without any approval or say by Congress. And what we know is when you cut, for example, when you cut payments to our local doctors, there are fewer of them to see our seniors. If you cut, and it is, we've had since the bill passed, We've had 300 Texas doctors who say, I'm sorry, we can't see new Medicare patients. And if there's one group who need to see a doctor they know and a doctor who knows them, it's our elderly. And so this bill is already chasing physicians and providers out of the system. But the patient-centered outcomes and the Independent Payments Advisory Board and these values-based outcomes are what has been used. And these are the infant organizations that grow into the rationing groups in other countries that take the same approach as here. Everything in green here, these green boxes, are increased taxes or cuts to Medicare. Over $1 trillion of new taxes and cuts. The taxes are on everything from medical devices to healthcare plans to prescriptions to tanning beds to small businesses and professionals, new investment taxes, $500 billion. The other $500 billion comes from Medicare cuts on community hospitals, home care agencies, nursing homes, hospice, and the biggest cut of all is to seniors who have Medicare Advantage. Can I ask how many seniors here have a Medicare Advantage plan? A lot. It is the most popular plan in Texas, the most popular plans in America, and for good reason. But this new government doesn't like Medicare Advantage plans, so they cut them severely. And according to the Health and Human Services, this very person right there, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all seniors in America will be forced out of their Medicare Advantage plan or will pay an extra $900 a year to stay in it. So when the president says if you like your health care plan you can keep it, that's not true. And it's certainly not true for seniors in America. I don't care what Andy Griffith says, who I love Andy Griffith, but his new ads are wrong. Your benefits are going to change. And those cuts don't go to make Medicare better or stronger. It goes to pay for this new health care system. That's where it goes. So all the green boxes are taxes and cuts. The yellow boxes here are new mandates on insurance. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The light blue circles are the expansion of government into our private market in healthcare. There's the IRS, which because of all these new taxes and mandates, because if you recall, the whole basis of this plan is simple. Everyone must have government-approved health care or pay a tax. Every business must offer government-approved health care or pay a tax. That's at the heart of this health care system. And to force America to comply with all that, it's estimated the IRS will have to hire 16,000 new agents to do their job. If we need 16,000 of anything in America, it's 16,000 more doctors and nurses.
Amen.
That's actually what we need in healthcare, but you don't see it in this way. A couple thoughts before we finish. We couldn't fit the whole healthcare bill on one chart. This actually represents 1/3 of the bureaucracy. What we did, though, to help understand, because between physicians here and patients there, as I noted, there's 159 new bureaucratic agencies and boards and all this. We created what we call bundles of bureaucracy. That if this were a computer screen and you popped on those little triangles or those three-colored buttons there, if you popped them up like you did on a computer screen, for example, up there would pop up 59 new government demonstration programs. Up there would pop 22 new bureaucracies we couldn't fit on the page. Up here, you would pop up 19 special interest provisions from the Louisiana Purchase, the sweet deal they got to get this bill through the Senate, to 5 special provisions for the AARP, to 2 huge special interest provisions for unions. And down here, you pop that, insurance mandates. There are 17 new mandates on insurance, all of which drive up the cost of insurance. Some of them you may agree with. All of them drive up the price. And despite what the President said about keeping the plan you like, according to the President's own Health and Human Services, between 1/2 and 3/4 of everyone who gets health care at work will be forced into a different plan. They won't be grandfathered by this. They'll be subject to those new mandates. the new exchanges, the new regulations, again, driving up prices as well. So when you look at this, I don't know what words you use to describe this chart.
Chaos.
Yeah. But is this the healthcare reform you were hoping for as a country? I don't think it is by any stretch of the imagination. That's why when people say, you know, we just really need to tweak this a little, and I don't think that's going to cut it. I think we need to repeal it and start over, replace it with real reform.